Let's go to Eddie Yeranian live in Cairo. Eddie, you're in Cairo. I'm in Washington. President el-Sisi in Washington. What's going on? Give us an update.
Yes, John. Well, the Egyptian media obviously is portraying the situation from the point of view of Egypt. So let's give you that first. What preoccupies Egypt these days as a country? Well, the situation in Libya, the unstable situation, the fact there are two rival governments in the one half and then the other half of the country, the fact that you've got Islamic militants operating in Libya, Islamic militants operating in the north of the Sinai, the economy, of course, that's got everyone preoccupied here. It's probably a lot of the fault of the previous government, Hosni Mubarak, over the years, not reforming the Egyptian economy. But when I look at the Washington Post editorial on how Egypt should reform, you ask yourself if they're not on another planet, and I can't imagine that those are reforms I'd want to see. But anyway, what's on Mr. Sisi's mind also, obviously, the terrorism situation. He went to the Arab League summit in Amman last week and said that they need to tackle terrorism on an Islamic basis, using Islamic institutions like the Al-Azhar University here in Cairo to promote a more moderate Islam. I'm not sure if that's going to work, but that was his suggestion. He's made it before. President Obama rebuffed him about at least a year and a half ago. And clearly the other fires that are burning in the Middle East, Yemen, that is on the Red Sea. It affects the shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb up the Red Sea and ultimately through the Suez Canal, which adversely affects Egypt's revenue stream. So a lot of crises that are bothering people. And from the U.S. point of view, of course, the U.S. wants help in fighting terrorism. The U.S. gives Egypt $1.3 billion and perhaps would like to see other things happening here, more cooperation in battling terrorism globally. I think Egypt does battle terrorism on its own turf. And, well, a couple other outstanding issues which Jazeera TV has been mentioning. I really don't know the merits of the cases. There's a woman who has an American passport who was arrested, who was running an organization for street children that seems to have the human rights organizations up in arms. I really haven't looked into the merits of the case one way or the other, so I shouldn't speak on it. And other than that, well, the usual publicity. I think both sides would like to be seen smiling in front of the cameras and hit it off because it looks good in there for both leaders.
Okay, so that's Sisi's agenda. Let me just ask you this. El-Sisi, I think he really wants to have a good relationship with President Trump, right? So your guys,
clearly.
Go ahead. Right?
Yeah. Well, he met Trump outside the UN in New York back in September before he became president, and they made the Egyptian media made a special point of saying that they had a good relation back then before he became president.
All right, and so cornerstone of this, Edward, is without a doubt el-Sisi wants our $1.3 billion that we provide to Egypt for their military. They want that $1.3 billion to keep flowing right towards their military, no question. Do you see any other, besides just continuing that, do you see in this meeting any other potential breakthroughs, any other ways that Trump and el-Sisi might enhance their relationship with some kind of tangible results into something else?
Well, if President Trump, for instance, were to say that he agrees with Sisi about battling Islamic fundamentalism from a religious perspective and using institutions to moderate that militant Islam that's very pernicious here in Egypt and other places in the Gulf as well. That might be a breakthrough. Libya, I think you read the media and everyone says, well, whoa, there's chaos in Libya. Of course, if you follow Libya as closely as I do and see who's who's done what over the months that this chaos has built up, you would see why there is chaos in Libya, and it isn't really. The Washington Post points out chaos is mounting in Libya. Wouldn't say it's mounting. I'd say it's about the same. But if you make all the wrong moves like President Obama did on Libya, then clearly you would increase chaos. So I suspect President Trump will change the policy in Libya, and that might be something of a small breakthrough there as well.
To encourage that, or basically allay any fears that Americans might have in going to Egypt on vacation and touring and some things of that nature?
Well, here's the thing. The media has made a special point of trying to drum up fears that Egypt is unsafe. Clearly, there are things that happen and you could get into trouble. I don't want to minimize that, but you have probably more of a chance of getting hit by a car here in Cairo than you do of getting blown up by a terrorist bomb. The Egyptian military keeps the situation fairly quiet, and yet at the same time, every time there's a little incident, they drum up. For instance, northern Sinai, which has no effect on Cairo whatsoever, that always makes the headlines in the media. A lot of media organizations are playing narratives rather than giving you facts. I don't know. You've seen that with the American political situation as well. You listen to their narratives, and when they're wrong, you ask yourself, why are they presenting this sort of narrative? I don't know. I really don't. But I do know a lot of the narratives you read in the media are wrong.
Okay, no question about that. On that, we're in total agreement. Many of the narratives are wrong, no doubt. Let's get to the Turkish situation. Turkey becoming a real problem now for both Egypt, obviously, and the Trump administration. Do you see any progress there? What do you think the main issues are now on the table?
Well, I think ultimately, you don't read about this in the media, and yet once again, you have to ask yourself why not. But one of the major problems here is you've got a lot of rival pipelines that are supposed to be going through Syria, Iraq, Turkey, gas pipelines specifically. Qatar and Iran both want to send their gas to Europe. Qatar sells liquid natural gas, so they don't actually need a pipeline. But the mere fact that you've got rival pipeline projects all across this area means that you've got perpetual instability that's brewing. And I'm not sure which side the Turks are on with any of these rival pipeline projects. President Erdogan has bet on the wrong horse in Syria. He's paid the price. He's also increased his Kurdish, the antipathy of his Kurdish population. He's got a Kurdish revolt internally. He's got the Kurds on his back in Syria and in Iraq. So he's in big trouble. He's played to the cameras with President Putin to say, hey, we've got good relations, but President Putin has taken advantage of him up and down the line. So I can't imagine that his relations are really very good, other than to say, spit in Washington's face and say, hey, we're doing something against you. And I don't know really what he's doing that's against us at the moment. But yeah, he's in big trouble. What do I see do I see any positive things coming out of it? Certainly there's the hope of the Turkish government of joining the European Union have been dashed. Both the French and the Germans have said so much that there's really no chance of that happening. The Turks have pushed refugees into Europe, which has annoyed the Europeans considerably. So he's got everybody against him right now, deservedly so probably, and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
All right, Edward, look, it's going to be an interesting meeting today. President of Egypt, President el-Sisi, in Washington today, meeting with President Trump. And those meetings are going to be going on all day. They're not one of these half-hour things. So I know they've got a lot to talk about, and hopefully their relationship can continue to grow from what it is now. I do think these two leaders really like each other, and I think it's a real asset for us to be on good footing with the president of Egypt. Eddie, thank you. We're out of time. I want to thank Eddie Yeranian, our guy in Cairo, live in Egypt today. Thanks for that very in-depth reporting, Edward. As always, good to have you with us, man.